And welcome, everybody. This is the Appraiser Coach podcast. My name is Dustin Harris. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you. Have an interesting show, I think, lined out for you today as we have a returning guest who always has a great opinion to share, and I appreciate him being on. His name is Mr. Tim Andersen, but I'll introduce him right after I do a quick shout out to each of our sponsors. First of all, we are sponsored by Working RE Magazine. Folks, just over the weekend, I was kind of curious as to what was going on in the appraisal world and jumped on workingre.com and found out because that's the kind of company they are. They keep us on the edge of what's going on in the appraisal profession. If you have not checked them out recently, go to workingre.com. That's workingre.com. Alamode is a sponsor here and has been since the beginning. Alamode.com/free trial is where you can go to get 15 days free trial, and then you get your 10-year price guarantee at $349 per year. Once again, that address is alamode.com/free trial. And finally, we are sponsored by DataMaster. I was on the phone with DataMaster just last week. Can't wait to tell you about that and what's coming. But for now, go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Once again, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Well, as I teased in the beginning, have a returning guest on with us. He's been on several episodes. His name is Tim Andersen. He has been a real estate appraiser since 1986. Wow, I can hardly even spit that out. That was so long ago. He's an SRPA and an MAI. Tim, what did I miss on your intro?
Oh, Dustin, absolutely nothing. That's absolutely fabulous. And you're right. 1986 was in the previous millennium.
Yeah, that was man. That was before Fire Ray. That was before USPAP. You're well seasoned, my friend.
Well, that's one way to look at it. My wife just says I'm old, but okay, well seasoned. All right, I'll buy that.
All right. Well, we'll say experienced here.
Okay. All right.
Tim reached out to me after I had put out an episode. It was episode number 186. And the episode, if you've not listened to it, I would go back and listen to it because today's going to be a follow-up to that. So if you want to pause the podcast and go back to episode 186, listen to that one first, and then come back to this episode. You'll probably understand a little bit better what's going on. But let me give you the gist of it. I had a complaint waged against me by a borrower who was upset at value. Bottom line is I felt good about the appraisal, felt like the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. Nevertheless, it went to the state board. I frankly thought that it should be, it probably should have been ignored right up front simply because it simply was. I mean, for without getting into a lot of detail, it really was a borrower who thought his house was a castle. Her house, I guess it was a female. Her house was a castle. She was upset at the value, and her recourse was to first call me and want to complain to me. I, calmly and professionally explained to her that I would love to answer all of her questions, but I would need to have permission from the client first, rather than do that. Or maybe she tried to do that and they wouldn't give it to her. I don't know. But the next thing I heard about it was through a letter from my state board saying that there had been a complaint. I, of course, gave them my work file and my reports and everything else, as well as a letter. They escalated it to an internal review, and then, of course, we had to go through that process as well. Bottom line was, Tim, I went through that process, and I was found not guilty, if you will. They did not find issues with the report that they wanted to pursue any further. Basically said, hey, watch yourself, but we're letting you off for now, buddy. And so I had talked a little bit about in that prior show the gist of going through that process and why I thought that it was a little bit unfair as to who can wage complaints. So first question for you, Tim, is what is it about that prior episode that you believe that we should probably revisit today?
Well, Dustin, first of all, let me give a disclaimer. We're gonna start making some legal noises here, and I'm not an attorney.
Neither am I.
Not an attorney. So we're not giving legal advice. This is for just general information and knowledge.
Well, and I even want to back up even further as well, because I should have asked you, Tim Andersen, please establish your credibility. Why is it that you should be on this show today? Well, you're going to say I shouldn't be. But I'm telling you should. But what brings why are you here today?
Why am I here today? Simple. Because the weather is too beautiful outside to go ride my bicycle. No.
Okay.
Dustin, no, this is something that I do. I do a lot of consulting with appraisers who find themselves on the wrong end of a letter from their state board or a subpoena or whatever. And they call me saying, what did I do wrong? Please help me. What do I do now? So on and so forth. And so what you and I are going to do today through the course of this interview is generally, but only superficially, walk through the process of what happens and what you should do, and even more importantly, what you shouldn't do when the state comes calling or when you find yourself as a defendant in a lawsuit.
Okay, good. So in other words, you have had experience helping other appraisers, counseling with other appraisers. Have you ever been on a state board?
No, I have never been on any state board at all. I have never consulted with any state board, although unofficially I have chatted with state board members. Some of them are my friends.
All right, good.
Some of them are fellow USPAP instructors. But no, I've never served on any state appraisal board. No.
Okay, but you have had enough experience over the years to understand what appraiser boards are looking for, and thus roll that into the other side, the advocacy for an appraiser, and to say, hey, okay, you got that letter, now what? So let's start there. Let's start there, Tim. So there's nothing worse. Well, okay, there's a few things that are worse, but very few things that are worse in an appraiser's life when they go to the mailbox and they open it up and there is a letter in there and it is obviously from the state board and it's not renewal time. Because I can tell you that's the first thing I always ask myself. Okay, what month is it? Right? So,
Dustin, at that point, when you get that letter, obviously your blood pressure is going to go up and you're going to feel confused and you're going to start saying, well, I haven't done anything wrong and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Well, quite frankly, maybe you haven't.
Yeah.
So the first thing you do is you sit down and you calm yourself down. Then you read very carefully what the letter says. Chances are, somewhere in that letter, it will say, in so many words, now we can make this all go away, just sign the attached consent agreement, send us a check for $500.
Really?
And
I've never seen that.
That will make the problem go away. But you need to be very careful about signing that consent agreement, because what you're doing is saying, yep, I'm guilty. And, well, violation of USPAP and violation of state appraisal statute is not a crime. Therefore, you cannot be either guilty or not guilty. The point is, you don't want to sign that consent agreement. So the first thing you do is you send an email or a letter or whatever it is back to the person who sent you the letter, and in the most professional, courteous terms possible, indicate to them that you will respond through your counsel and you request a 30-day extension in order to bring your team on board.
Okay.
The state has absolutely no responsibility to give you that 30-day extension, but the state probably will.
Okay.
And then you're going to use that extra 30 days, again, to get with your E&O people. You're going to use that extra 30 days, if you need to hire an attorney, to hire what's called an administrative law attorney. You don't want a divorce attorney. You don't want a white-collar crime attorney. You don't want a defense attorney. You want an administrative law attorney. And then depending on what that attorney knows about USPAP, you may need to bring in a USPAP expert.
Okay.
And then one of the steps you're going to take is you're going to send a copy of your work file and a copy of your report to your USPAP expert, if you indeed choose to hire one, and ask him or her to indicate to you if indeed there is a problem.
Okay.
Now, I've mentioned this to appraisers before, and they say, well, that's a violation of the confidentiality rule. No, it's not. And it's not a violation of the confidentiality rule because that rule recognizes that in certain instances, among which is a letter from the state or a lawsuit, that the due process of law must be allowed to work. And sending your appraisal and your work file out to a USPAP expert in these particular conditions is an operation of due process of law, which does not violate the confidentiality rule.
So you're telling me that I can't just write a letter or an email back to the state and say, screw off, I've got my deal is between me and my client.
Well, of course you can do that. And then,
I knew you were going to say that.
You should probably just also send your license.
Yeah, exactly. After you send it through the shredder, right?
Yeah, of course you can do that, Dustin. And, you mentioned an interesting point. This is between me and my client. You got nothing to do with it. Because the state board issues your license, your state board not only has every right, it also has the legal responsibility to review your license to see if you need to keep it or if it should take it back.
Right.
So, yeah, you can call up and say, hey, fight me. But that's probably not the step you want to take.
Okay, I want to go back to something you said earlier because this is a question that comes up quite often, and I know that you're not an an E&O expert, but I'll ask you the question anyway. The question is, at what point do you tell your E&O provider? At the point you get the letter? At the point it becomes a serious problem? In other words, I think what appraisers are asking is, well, golly gee, this doesn't seem like a big problem yet. Why should I tell my E&O provider and my insurance premiums possibly rise?
Well, clogged arteries aren't a problem until you have a heart attack.
I love it.
But the issue is not to get your arteries clogged in the first place. Well, when you get that letter from the state, basically your first phone call is to your E&O people.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, somebody says, "Oh, I don't want to do that. They'll raise my premium." No, they won't, because you call them up. They might raise it for other reasons, but that phone call is not going to raise your premium. And you need to let them know. Now, chances are they're going to say, okay, just keep us posted. But that's the first phone call you need to make. Get a hold of your E&O people, tell them what's going on. And then they'll likely say, okay, keep us posted. If you need legal help, we'll provide it to you, assuming you bought that when you bought your policy.
Right.
What you have to remember, however, is your E&O people are not your attorneys. The attorneys the E&O people hire are the E&O providers' attorneys, and they may advise you, but you may need to get your own attorney, and your policy may pay for that. It may not, depending on the coverage you purchased.
Okay, good. So we've done that process. We've called the E&O provider. We've gone through. Maybe we use an expert that they provide. Maybe we use an attorney that they provide. Maybe not. Maybe they say, hey, you know what? This is a state board complaint. There's not really much we can do there. And so then you turn to what? Someone like you, Tim?
Yeah, and there are a lot of people in the U.S. who do this kind of provide this kind of service. And you spoke with Bob Keith.
I did.
Yeah, Bob does it. I do it. Danny Wiley does it. Ted Whitmer does it. There are a bunch of people who can help you. There's Ed Gillespie in Colorado. He's also an attorney. He was an attorney and is an appraiser. He'll help. There are a lot of people out there who'll be more. You mentioned Mike Brunson the other day. Mike's out of Las Vegas. Yeah, there are a bunch of people who can help. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what next? We just follow their lead at that point?
Well, you get in touch with them and you say, look, did I mess up? And you send them a copy of the complaint. And remember, a complaint, Dustin, is not a charge. A complaint is just that. It's a complaint.
That's good to know.
And as long as the complaint does not ascend to a charge, it's confidential. Now, I'm going to rag on you a little bit now.
Yeah, I do.
When you on a podcast admitted that a complaint had been filed against you, you lost all concept of confidentiality.
Okay.
You should not have done that.
Okay.
Because a complaint is not a charge.
Okay.
What's going to happen? Go ahead.
No. You finish your question. Then I'm gonna come back and circle around.
And until a charge is filed against you, not a complaint, until a charge is filed against you, it's confidential. Because the state may go through the investigative process and say, there's nothing here.
Okay.
And then dismiss the complaint.
Which they did.
As a result, that would have remained confidential. But now you admitted to it, so everybody knows it.
Well, you know that was all hypothetical, though. I was just playing to the microphone.
Yeah, all hypothetical.
Absolutely. Allegedly, I received the complaint. So, but here's where I want to circle back, Tim. So, the question then comes, where do I and other appraisers go from here? Because the question, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I sign up for E&O, when I sign up for a new AMC, when I go through this process of renewal with any of these companies, the question is not, have you ever had a charge filed against you? I don't think. Isn't it, have you ever had a complaint filed against you?
You're going to have to look at the language of the form. Most forms say, have you ever had a charge filed against you? And if indeed there was a complaint filed and it was dismissed, then no, you've never had a charge filed against you. And you can answer that honestly.
Okay.
If
so
the form
depends on how it's asked then.
Yeah. If the form says, have you ever had a complaint filed against you, that's different. But the point is, many states maintain confidentiality if it's merely a complaint. If the state dismisses it, it's confidential.
Okay.
Whereas if the state says, no, we're going to charge you and see what happens, then it becomes public record. Then you have to answer that question, yes, I have had a charge filed against me. But as we said earlier, since I'm not an attorney, then you would have to take that question to your counsel, your legal counsel, and get answers from him or her.
Okay, good. No, that's excellent advice, and I think that's wise for listeners to understand that there is a difference between a complaint and a charge, a formal charge. So, Tim, you're saying even with a formal charge, even with let's say you go through the process and you're charged formally and you appear before the state and everything else, and you're found not guilty at the end of that process, you've still been charged at that point, and you still have to report that.
You've still been charged, and at that point, you would have to say, yes, I was charged, and here are the details. And as things worked out, the state decided the charges were baseless.
Okay, good.
Or something like that.
Good. Which is actually what happened to me, but you're saying the mistake was
no, hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if I had an episode and called it, I don't know, say 186 on the Appraiser Coach podcast, even though it was all a ruse to get people to understand how to handle this, if I had actually had that happen, then that might be a problem.
If you had actually had that happen, yes, that might be a problem.
All right, I'm glad we're on the same page here. So, speaking of being on the same page, folks, I want to talk to you about DataMaster for just a second. And the reason I say, speaking of being on the same page, there's an interesting process that we go through as appraisers, and that is many of us have more than one monitor. So we have two monitors, and we might have the MLS on one side, and we might have our appraisal page, if you will, on the other side. DataMaster allows you to be on the same page in this sense. Instead of looking at one monitor and then taking that data in your brain and transferring it to the other monitor via the keyboard, DataMaster does all of that for you, folks. I'm telling you, this will save you 30 to 60 minutes per report. And it will take whatever is actually in the MLS. So there's no human error. There's no fat fingering it. It comes directly from the MLS, directly into the other monitor. Folks, you need to be using DataMaster. If you're not, I will allow you to use them for 14 days. Okay, they'll allow you to use them for 14 days, but I'm going to tell you how to do that. I want you to go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Once again, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach, and you can use DataMaster, unlimited downloads for 2 weeks once you figure out how much this is going to save you. And that's the kicker here, folks. There's a reason they give you 14 days free. I guarantee on the 15th day, you're going to be pulling out your credit card. And even at that point, it is not very expensive for what DataMaster does. It saves me a part-time employee. Let me repeat that. It saves me a part-time employee. So I am happy to pay the very small fee every month to use DataMaster. You will be too. Once again, datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. And speaking of getting things done quickly and effectively and efficiently, I have been with AllaMode for over 20 years. That's 2 decades, folks. And I have not been tempted to move to another service provider as far as my appraisal programs go. Why? Because AllaMode has been in business over 30 years. They have all of the intense and very usable background toolbox that allows me to do my appraisals quickly and efficiently and with high quality. AllaMode will do that for you as well. If you've not tried them, why don't you try them for 15 days? It's allamode.com/free trial. That's half a month, folks. You can try AllaMode free at alamo.com/free trial. And then once you decide that this is going to be part of your process going forward, how about a 10-year price guarantee at $349 per year, less than one appraisal fee for entire year usage of Alamode? Once again, folks, go to alamo.com/free trial or 1-800-ALAMODE. And finally, we are sponsored by Working RE Magazine. As I mentioned earlier, I went to Working RE this weekend and read several articles on things that are going on over in the Washington, D.C. area as far as appraisals go, and in my local area, meaning what do I need to know as a local appraiser right here and right now. Working RE helps me to know that information because these individuals, the publisher, the editor, the writers there at Working RE, are very involved in what is happening in the appraisal life. You need to figure it out on your own by going to workingre.com. Check them out, workingre.com. And also, while you're there, make sure that you are on their list for their printed version, which comes out every quarter. That's Working RE Magazine. Once again, workingre.com. And welcome back, folks. We are talking with Mr. Tim Andersen, who is sitting in lovely Florida. What's the temperature like over there, Tim?
79 degrees. Breeze is out of the southeast. A few
boy.
fluffy clouds in the sky. Canning weather, just wonderful.
Well, you know what? I woke up to -2 this morning, and I still got in my car, and I still went to the gym. So what do you think of that?
Well, I'm proud of you for going to the gym. I went to the gym yesterday, and I still can't move.
That's funny. And I'm going to say, why did you go to the gym when you could just go outside, right?
Well, the outside doesn't have weights, and I may never look at another weight again.
I hear you. It's always fun. It's always a fun process. Well, folks, we are talking with Tim Andersen because Tim, is kind of a side thing. He helps appraisers who maybe have had a state board complaint waged against them. He helps them walk through that process, and he's helping us walk through that process as well. I hypothetically, allegedly, had one of these things happen to me recently, and you can go back to episode 186 and read about that hypothetical situation, because if it had been a real situation that I had put out there on the air, that I might be in trouble in the sense that I had a complaint. It was never a formal charge that I understand. I don't remember ever seeing that word. How would we know, Tim? What's the difference between a complaint and a charge? I don't even know if I was charged.
Okay, someone gets upset. Theoretically, someone gets upset. Hypothetically, someone gets upset.
Sure.
And writes a letter to the state saying, this silly appraiser didn't appraise my house high enough, so I didn't get enough equity and I can't buy my boat.
Yeah.
And therefore the appraisal is wrong. Well, you know, what's interesting is we live in a society, our way of looking at stuff tends to be black and white, right or wrong, correct or incorrect, and appraisals aren't. And appraisals are, by definition, an opinion. Now, your opinion is either well-formed or it's not well-formed.
Right.
Okay. And the state, in your hypothetical case, the state of hypothetical Idaho hypothetically decided that your opinion was indeed well-formed. Therefore, the hypothetical complaint was hypothetically baseless.
Right.
And it hypothetically dismissed the complaint.
Exactly.
If, however, on the other hand, a state were to decide, no, there's something here, we got to look more seriously into this, then at that point, charges would be formally filed, and the appraiser would be invited to either request what's called an administrative hearing or what's called an informal hearing, which is a complete misnomer because informal it ain't. But
Okay.
it's different than a formal hearing. And we're not going to get into that because that's like going to court, and a different set of rules apply. So we're not going to go there. But if you're invited to come before your state appraisal board, you can bring expert witnesses. You can bring character witnesses. People get sworn in. An attorney, a prosecuting attorney, will present the case. And believe me, it will. When the prosecuting attorney gets through presenting the charge, you'll want to go, well, holy cow, I am guilty. Boy, they ought to beat me to death. Right. But then you'll be given the opportunity to present your side. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? The members of the appraisal board will put questions to you. Some of them will be embarrassing, some of them won't. And then when it's all done, they'll say thank you, and they'll go into executive session, and they'll decide, number one, if you indeed violated USPAP and the state appraisal statutes, and then if you did, what penalty to attach.
Okay.
And the penalty may be nothing more than a nasty letter, don't do it again.
Right. And I want to get to that in just a second. I want to talk about penalties in just a second, but let's circle back a little bit. So, in this hypothetical situation, if I had only hypothetically received a letter and it was only back and forth correspondence through the mail, that would most likely just be a complaint and not a charge.
That would be a complaint.
Okay. Let's talk about complaints for just a second, Tim. The purpose of this, the prior episode, number 186, was really to ask the question as to, is it to... I guess I struggle with the process sometimes and what is allowed and just what is allowed. For example, the situation that you laid out, the house didn't appraise high enough. I didn't get my home equity loan. I can't buy my boat. I'm ticked off. And, the fastest person or the closest person that I can see to finger is going to be the appraiser. And so I'm going to point the finger at him or her, and that's where the complaint's going to go. I'm guessing most state boards get a lot of those that they probably just dismiss outright.
Right. Yeah. Most state boards have the equivalent of what's called a probable cause committee.
Okay.
Now, the complaint still has to be investigated.
Okay.
Because the state can't dismiss the complaint until it learns that there was indeed nothing there. And anecdotally, and I don't mean to imply any kind of scientific rigor to this set of statistics.
All right.
But I have been told by state investigators, by state board members, that about half the complaints that are filed are dismissed. And those that are eventually come to charges, about a quarter of those result in nothing happening. But the point is, you've still had a complaint filed against you. You've had you're compounding the stress in your life. You've got that to worry about. But from a standpoint of 1,000 complaints are filed every year, 500-ish of them get dismissed because, as in your hypothetical case, there was nothing there.
Right. Well, how many of those are dismissed without the appraiser even knowing? And I guess that's my question. I'm wondering how many complaints.
None.
None? You always
None.
hear about it.
The appraiser knows. The state boards, basically FIREA says the state boards will be set up to give licenses or certifications or whatever generic term you want to use. Therefore, they're in the position to take them away. And if a complaint is filed against you, you will know. Now, you may not necessarily know who filed it, but that's really not hard to figure out. And then please remember that the state can take a look at your appraisal, take a look at your work file, and say, well, this complaint is really stupid. Mm-hmm. However, there are some problems in the work file, and the states can file what's called sui generis, which is Latin for on its own or of its own volition. So the state can say, boy, that was a really stupid charge from Joe consumer out here. However, we find no support whatsoever for the adjustments in the work file. Therefore, we are going to bring charges against the appraiser.
That's very interesting. So in other words, the original charge might be baseless, but then as they start to look at the appraisal, they go, yeah, that might be baseless, but look what else I found.
Yeah, that's the point. And because violation of USPAP and violation of state statute is not a quote-unquote crime, the state can go on what amounts to a fishing expedition to see what it finds.
Okay. So we talked about the scary prospect of receiving this type of letter in the mail. And I know this next question we could have a whole 3 episodes on, I'm sure. But the question, I guess, Tim, is let's talk about avoidance. In other words, we've talked about once that letter comes, what's the next step? I don't want to have that letter to begin with. So can you give us maybe 1, 2, 3, bang, 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 some things that you see on a regular basis that might help the average appraiser avoid complaints to begin with?
Yeah, first of all, you need to get a copy of the Fannie Mae Selling Guide, and that's incredibly difficult. You go to the Fannie Mae website, you go to Selling Guide, you download it. Hello, and like I say,
you said it was incredibly difficult. And I'm like, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't have one.
Yeah, and then you using the find function on your computer, because it's a PDF,
yeah,
you type in 16 unacceptable appraisal practices, and then you hit enter.
Nice.
And it takes you to the 16 unacceptable appraisal practices, and you need to read those.
Good.
Now, we're not going to go into them here because, as you're saying, we could do three episodes on those.
Sure.
But if you're familiar with those 16 unacceptable appraisal practices, you're going to avoid a lot of problems. Now, one of those 16 unacceptable appraisal practices is not having support for your adjustments. And we see way too often that, well, for example, I started in 1986, and I was sitting in my cubicle doing an appraisal, and I came to a fireplace. Well, the comparable had a fireplace. My subject didn't. So I stood up in my cubicle and said, what's a fireplace adjustment? And somebody said $1,500. So I sat down, $1,500 adjustment, moved on. Well, here we are in 2017. If you ask what a fireplace adjustment, and I should say in Florida,
okay,
if you ask what a fireplace adjustment is, they're going to say $1,500.
Right.
So it may work. I mean, it may be quote unquote right.
Right.
But the point is, there's no support for it. And the state.
Wait a minute, Jim in the other cubicle told me isn't support.
Well, the state is probably not going to consider it as support.
Dang. Okay.
So you've got to support your adjustments. Now, you say one of my favorite. I'm going to use the word excuses. I don't mean to offend anybody with that. One of my favorite excuses is, well, this is the way I've always done it. And then my response is, well, then you've always done it wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Which doesn't make a whole lot of folks happy. But the point is, you've got to have support for your adjustments. Now, when we use the word support, that can be indirect support, but somewhere, somehow, you've got to have from the market, which is a wide-ranging word, but you've got to have from the market support for your adjustments. And if you do, great. If you don't, there may be some problems.
Okay. All right. We talked earlier about Working RE Magazine, and Tim, I know you wrote an article on this very topic in Working RE Magazine. If you want to go there, folks, just go to workingre.com. In their search bar, type in "dealing effectively with complaints." Probably that's enough, but the whole title of the article is "Dealing Effectively with Complaints When the State Comes Calling." And this is an article by Tim Andersen. Goes in a lot more detail than we have time to go into today on the podcast. But one of the things that you talked about as I read through that article is that in these situations, you're often guilty until proven innocent. Well, that seems kind of un-American, my friend. How do they get off doing that?
Yeah, Dustin, the Constitution says that when you are charged with a crime, you are guilty until proven innocent. Since a charge of violating USPAP or violating state appraisal statutes is not a crime, that constitutional protection does not apply.
Okay, well, there you go. You've heard it here, folks. Gee, that makes me feel good. Tell me something that will make me feel good.
I mean, that just gives you a warm and fuzzy, doesn't it?
Makes me feel so much better about next time I allegedly get one of these letters. So as we close up here, Tim, our time's short, but I want to just ask you, in your experience, Where do these things usually go? That's the $66,000 question. When I was allegedly in this process, I might have asked Mr. Keith. So what are your thoughts? Where does this go? And his answer was wise. He said, I've seen state boards do. He said, I don't see anything here either. I think they're on a fishing expedition. Blah 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 blah. He said I really, but he says I've seen some states go after things that and do things that how do you put it, that seemed a little unbalanced for what the situation was. And on the other hand, I've seen some other sides where appraisers had done some really egregious things and they just got a slap on the wrist. My question is, you get this letter in the mail, you go through this process, and every appraiser is going to be losing sleep over this, wondering what happens now. That's without knowing the specific situation, obviously, Tim. In general, do appraisers need to lose sleep over this kind of a situation?
Oh yeah, because the reason you need to lose sleep.
This was supposed to be good news, man. I totally set you up for that.
No, just calm down.
All right.
Calm down.
All right, go ahead.
What the appraiser has got to take away from this is, okay, I made a mistake. There's nothing I can do about that. But what can I do to avoid the same mistake in the future? Well, okay, even though this is difficult, you've got to turn something like this into a learning experience. And, let's face it, if you messed up, then get back with the state through your counsel and say, okay, I messed up. Let's, tell me what I need to do so that we get past this. And if you go and say, look, I'm going to take this class and I'm going to hire a mentor and I'm going to have my reports reviewed privately before they go out, the state may go, okay, that sounds good. We won't hit you with any more penalty than that. Or the state may say, oh, no, we want a pound of flesh, the merchant of Venice kind of thing.
Right.
It just depends on what your attorney is able to negotiate and if the state's attorney's having a bad hair day or a good hair day.
Right. Right. I was sitting in my mastermind group here a couple of weeks ago. I won't reveal which one. I've got 5 of them now, so take your choice. But one of the individuals spoke up and made mention that they had been in I believe it was a USPAP class, actually, and as kind of a bonus, as an extra. Maybe the state board member was just there or they invited him in or something, but needless to say, a state board member stood up and basically said, hey, here's the latest complaints, and on an overhead showed them basically these were all public knowledge. This is public information. And she went through each case just briefly and said, this person did this and da-da-da-da-da-da. And, one of the questions that came from the audience was, well, in these situations, what typically occurs? And her comment was, unless there is intentional fraud, an appraiser usually will not lose his or her license. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think she's right?
Yeah, having your license revoked is not the nuclear option, but it's pretty close to it.
Yeah. And
the state does not want to remove from you your ability to make a living unless the appraiser has just demonstrated an absolute pattern of classic, and you may have to edit this out, classic scumbaggery. Whereas if you just made a mistake, okay, you're going to pay a little penalty and move on.
Nice. Scumbaggery. That's I'm trying to think if I should put an explicit warning on this podcast episode.
Well,
if we're good to go.
You can edit that line out and say if the appraiser is found to have demonstrated a pattern of violation of USPAP and state statute.
There you go.
Then
I like scumbaggery better.
You like scumbaggery better? Okay. The state is going to frown on such action.
There you go. Tim Andersen, sitting in Florida in the beautiful weather and a little bit sore from going to the gym. Thanks for spending time with us today, my friend.
Dustin, it is a pleasure and an honor, and my best, as always, to you and all of your family.
Thank you, my friend. And we will, of course, have Tim on again. He's a great guest and very knowledgeable. Been appraising since 1986. Folks, thanks for joining us today. I want to remind you that I am now offering a discount to the Go Create Some Value workshop, which you can find online. It's found at theappraisercoach.com, www.theappraisercoach.com. Just go to workshop, and in the checkout, make sure you put podcast to get $50 off that incredible workshop. Folks, thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next time.